This is the Red Line, and I am your host, Jimmy Red. Thanks for tuning in. We are back, folks, for another exciting week after college football, and that brings up another ranking. And with that being said, 4 of the top 10 teams went down this week, and 7 of the top 10 have went down in the last 2 weeks. So we've lost 7 of our top 10 in the last 2 weeks. If you're telling me there's not a lot of parity in college football, man, there is, just like the NFL. It's getting more and more competitive in every conference. Big Ten, SEC, ACC, all that stuff. So, getting more competitive. And with that being said, there are definitely some big changes here in the top 10. Coming in the top 10 now and having a perfect record last year and still perfect up to this point of the season would be UCF. That would be the team that Scott Frost has lost. Scott Frost is currently the head coach of Nebraska, and after 129 years of being in existence, Nebraska football, they have started off 0-6 for the first time in school history. So I feel bad for Nebraska and for sure Scott Frost, considering that his team that he used to coach is currently perfect. So that's a tough one to swallow. Next comes in Oklahoma. Oklahoma only has one loss. That one loss coming to Texas last week. Or 2 weeks ago, sorry. Then it comes in at 8 is Georgia. Georgia is a game we're going to talk about this week, as we all know Georgia was ranked 2 before this week started. They dropped 6 spots and are now down at the 8th spot. Jumping up 2 spots is Texas, them Longhorns. That's what I'm talking about. Hook 'em horns. Huge jump. Started the season off 23rd, 24th in the polls. Dropped out after the loss against Maryland. Have been in it ever since and been on a tear. So good job to them Horns after a big loss in week 1 to Maryland. Then Michigan comes in 6. LSU with a huge jump after a win this week over the number 2 team of Georgia. They're in up 8 spots up to 5. Notre Dame jumps inside the playoffs in 4 right now. Then you're going to bring in Clemson at 3. Ohio State at 2. And easily standing at the top with all but 1 vote. That 1 vote that they did not get went to Ohio State with 60 of the 61 votes is hands down Alabama. Alabama's got a little trouble right now with Tua. Leg injury, played most of the game. Took him out in the second half. Jalen Hurts came in there and had a phenomenal game. So, I don't think they're really struggling there in Alabama. They got 2 quarterbacks they can choose between, and they got a good coach with Nick Saban. So, that's the rankings for this week. Remember, 2 weeks from Tuesday night, which is tonight, the college football playoff rankings come out. So, starting next week on the episode, I will give predictions on who I think the 4 are going to be and who your first 1 and 2 out are. So I will give 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 who I think every week from next week on out on who's going to be in the college playoff and who's going to be looking out. So make sure you tune in to see who those are as well. And the first game I want to start off with is the Iowa State-West Virginia game. Man, let me tell you something about that. Iowa State, everybody knew, could have came in there and pulled an upset. We all knew that they were potentially able to do it. But let me tell you, they came in there and stunned number 6 West Virginia. Will Grier didn't stand a chance. And that quarterback that they have there at Iowa State, the freshman, and Brock Purdy, went crazy. 254 yards, 3 touchdowns as Iowa State throttled them 30-14. Wow. The Mountaineers had no chance in that game. Like, 0. When they snapped the football, it was pretty much over from the go. Obviously, West Virginia busted out to a 7-point lead early in the game and then fell apart very, very quickly. Because then all of a sudden, that's when the Cyclones turned it on. David Montgomery had a career-high 189 yards, rushed for the Cyclones as they jumped up to 3-3 on the season and 2-2 in conference. So, a great game by them. It's the first time that they've beat them as a ranked opponent. They've not beat West Virginia as a ranked opponent. So big shout out to them. But that is the 5th time that they've knocked off a top 20 team in the last 7 seasons. So that is a big shout out to Iowa State for sure. I'm huge to that. And Will Grier, man, that one hurts. Especially considering I was a Will Grier fan. I'm still on his bandwagon. I still think I'm going to stay on that wagon for him to win the Heisman. Most players are allowed to have one bad game. This is Will Grier's bad game. Now he's got to be solid through the rest of the year. I mean, Even Lamar Jackson had one. Baker Mayfield had one. Tim Tebow. Most of your Heisman guys have one game you can just toss it out and say it's a throw-me-away game. Burn the book game is what I call it. You burn the book, it ain't no good. You don't want to look at it. You don't want to look at that no more because those numbers ain't good for that one game. You have that in MVP seasons as well in the NFL as part of it. So, with that being said, this was probably the worst game that Will Grier has had in his collegiate career. He threw for just 100 yards on 11 of 15 passing. Wow. The whole team combined for 346 offensive yards. That is incredible. Your team played an entire football game and only had 346 yards. The quarterback of the other team only had 100 yards less than you throwing himself. You were ranked 6th in the country. You had the Big 12 ready to go and pretty much locked up because you were the only left unbeaten. Obviously Texas was unbeaten in conference, but they lost a game. They are still unbeaten in conference after the win they had against Baylor. So they are the only unbeaten left inside the Big 12. So now there's 2 teams between Baylor, Oklahoma, and Texas right there at the top of the Texas, West Virginia, and Oklahoma all up at the top of the Big 12. Who's going to come out with it? I don't know. But with the loss that happened in the Pac-12 between Washington and Oregon, which we're going to talk about here, I think, a little bit later on. Yes, we are. That's actually my next game. With that loss happening, that pretty much eliminates the Pac-12 because Stanford's struggling. Washington got its second loss. And I don't think Oregon's got the power to do it. So I think they're basically done the Pac-12, and that's going to jump the Big 12 basically in a spot for that, or it's going to hand it to an individual team who is not in a conference like a Notre Dame, or maybe give a double shot to the SEC again this year. But I'd really like to see the Big 12 get in there. I think they have the power to do it this year. I think Texas is too young, personally, in my opinion. I think it would be a better team to go in there. On my mind would be a West Virginia or an Oklahoma. I think Texas is too young, needs one more year. But as I mentioned, the next game we're going to talk about is the Oklahoma game. And Justin Herbert looked like Justin Herbert. That kid is phenomenal. Let me tell you about Justin Herbert. Everybody says this kid, Justin Herbert, is going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. I don't know if he is. I personally don't like him as a quarterback. I think he's talented. He's tall. He's big. He can run the football. But I think that there's better quarterbacks potentially to go into the NFL. Those people being the kid who plays for Missouri and Drew Lock. You got Will Grier. Jared Stidham, I think, will be a better quarterback in the NFL as well. So I think that everybody's a little high on him right at this moment. But he carried his team to this win because they were down and then able to fight themselves back into this game. And Washington missed a field goal at the end of the game to win it. And he shanked it just a little bit to the right side. So that sent the game into overtime. With that being said, Washington received the ball first after they lost the coin flip because Oregon won it in first overtime. They then got the ball, moved it up there, were unable to score. Had to settle for a field goal. So now they're up 27-24. So they know what they have to do. They have to shut down them from scoring a touchdown. Well, they did. All of a sudden, they got them into a huge third down. Where it was third down and I think it was like third down and 10, 12. And they threw the ball. The quarterback did, being Justin Herbert. And it was caught for a pickup of, I think it was 17. It was a 17-yard pickup. So it was a huge pickup there. And when it picked up that 17 yards, that put the ball at the 6. And putting the ball at the 6, the next play, they handed the ball off and went right up the middle. Touchdown, right up the house. And that was the end of the game. And Oregon took the W because of that. Myles Gaskin didn't play, which was a struggle for Washington, and Jake Browning did not have a great game. But when they took that ball and went right up the middle in the first and goal play, was over, man. And Oregon captured it, especially after Oregon had a big game last week. Were unable to win that 2 weeks ago. Were unable to win that, took the loss, and then come back and bounce back against the Huskies to get that win. The other game I want to talk about, this one here is one that's got a lot of people upset. And that's got the Georgia LSU game. And I am pumped about that one, folks. Pumped. And the reason I'm pumped about that is because it's a SEC matchup that knocked one of the teams that's in the top 4 out of the SEC. But hold on, folks. I know everybody's saying, well, that doesn't mean they're not going to get in. You're right. I know. Because if everybody remembers last year, there was a matchup between Georgia and Auburn earlier in the year. Georgia was defeated in that game by Auburn 40-17. Those two then met again in the SEC championship later on that year because Auburn was the co-champions after they defeated Alabama, was the co-champions. They went and were defeated and avenged that loss 28-7. So guess what? Georgia was able to get into the playoffs. Made it to the national championship. Almost won the national championship against Alabama. Could not pull it off, though. They were this close to being national champions. This close. That would have been the first time Nick Saban has been beat by a person he trained. Kirby Smart would have been the first one to defeat him, and he did it at the biggest stage, a national championship. How awesome would that have been? But don't freak out. So Georgia can still get in. I'm not freaking out about it, but let me tell you something. They made an absolute terrible play there in that game. I don't know what they were thinking when they were facing a 4th and 3. They faked the punt, flipped it over the head, and he got absolutely annihilated. I don't know what Kirby Smart was thinking. I don't know where that came from, why he even thought that was a good idea, because it wasn't. It was not good at all. I don't know what he was thinking. But they got this quarterback there at LSU, Jake Barrow, who, let me tell you, he's pretty good. He's a pretty good kid. He's pretty talented. He threw for 200 yards. He was 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 1 too. And you did that all against Georgia? I know Georgia lost their leader last year, and Raekwon Smith, who I really liked coming out of the draft. But I think Georgia's got to find a way to do some stuff. And the reason I think Georgia has to find a way to do stuff is because most of these teams are going to younger quarterbacks or are mobile, can move. You have to be able to move a little bit. In the NFL, not so much your linemen can all block for you most of the time because you get the right guys. Sometimes you got problems, unless you're Russell Wilson, you have that problem. But most of the time, you got time. College, you don't have that. Jake Fromm, he had a better line last year. He doesn't have it this year. So go to Justin Fields and let him, trying to think of how I want to say it, let him do more than just run basically the wildcat like you would let him do, which was not the right thing to do. Because, yes, he's fast. He can move the ball and he can go where he wants. But I think Jake Fromm is more of a pocket passer, which it shows. And Fields can move around. So go to Justin Fields. Everybody's going to a younger quarterback. Give the kid a shot. You saw what happened last year when Easton went down. Now Easton is no longer with you. He is transferred and is at Washington behind Browning. So he's not playing this year on his transfer year. But you saw what happened when you brought in a young one last year. Bring in Fields. See what he can do. If he doesn't do well in the first half, you know your offense is going to be ready to go. Or do it vice versa. Play Fromm in the first half and then bring Fields in the second half and see what he can do. Maybe you can pull a card like Clemson did and decide that, Kelly Bryant is not your person you want and you want to go to Trevor Lawrence, but it's too late for him to transfer out now because guess what? He's already played 4 games, so he can't transfer. So if I was Georgia, I would go at it that way. LSU on a tear, ends up winning that game 36-16, but Georgia, let me tell you, 4-1, tied for the lead in the conference, just behind Florida, 6-1 overall. So they still have a shot to win it, make it to the championship game. I think they will. I think they're able to defeat Florida. Florida's had a couple good games, but I don't think they're ready and to that talent level of Georgia. I think Georgia still finds a way in. And the other part, Texas A&M going to be tough. I think when they face Alabama, it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. I'm excited for that. Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban, awesome matchup. Also, the Auburn matchup, I'm not so excited about that anymore. They lost some games. They're in trouble. They just probably fell out of the rankings this week because they were ranked, I think it was like 21st, and I believe they fell out of the rankings this week. Let me check and see. But I believe they fell out of the rankings. Yes, Auburn is out of the rankings, so that's not even a matchup I really care about much anymore because they're out of the rankings. But you still got a lot of power there that they have to both worry about. Not saying count your chickens on Auburn yet. 1-3 on the year. 4-3 on the year, 1-3 in conference. Is it time to tell Gus Malzahn to, because he had a couple good years? I never thought Gus Malzahn was all that in the first place, or is it Jared Stidham? I think Stidham's not the problem because they did fine last year. Another game. This one here hurt some people, and that one was big. And that was when Michigan State defeated Penn State. That was big because this was the second time in a row, 2 years back-to-back, that Michigan State has defeated Penn State on a last-second play. They beat them last year on a field goal, and this year they beat them on a touchdown pass. And it was, wow. I mean, Brian Lawalski hit this pass 25 yards to Flunton Davis with 19 seconds left. 19 seconds left. He had a 25-yard touchdown pass. How do you do that? You can't let that happen if you're Penn State. You can't. James Franklin, man. Now, if I'm the one running the school, I'm a little upset. I understand we have great years, but back-to-back years, we have been defeated by the two same schools. We were defeated by Michigan State, and we're defeated by Ohio State back-to-back weeks. They had a bye this week, or the week before. So over a 3-week span, it was Ohio State, bye, and then they played Michigan State. They lost both of those games, and they weren't prepped with a bye for a Michigan State team that wasn't even ranked. And they weren't even prepped for it. I think your biggest problem, personally, is Trace McSorley. I don't think he's that all of what everybody makes him out to be. Their running back, though, man, let me tell you, that kid's talented. Miles Sanders ran for 162 yards and a touchdown. McSorley was only 19 for 32 with 192. They say he's the leading passer in program history, but there's not a whole lot of quarterbacks that I can really think of off the top of my head that went through Penn State. So, not saying a whole lot, really, in my mind. I think McSorley is your biggest trouble. I think James Franklin could potentially be on the hot seat again because he can't beat Ohio State and he can't beat Michigan State. It's 2 years in a row. Come on, Big Ten, find out what's up. James Franklin, you got to be on the hot seat this year, man. I know it's a winning year. You're ranked. You got people. But I think you got to be on the hot seat if you're James Franklin. Another one. So Wisconsin and Michigan. Yeah, them Wolverines. Jim Harbaugh, I was stoked about this game. I'm a huge Jim Harbaugh fan. I'm here with Jim Harbaugh. I'm here. Been a fan of his since I was a little kid. I thought he was a great quarterback when he played for Indianapolis Colts. That was my favorite quarterback of all times. All times, Jim Harbaugh. Alma mater, obviously everybody knows, was Michigan. Pumped about it. Great quarterbacks come out of there. Name a few of them. You got Jim Harbaugh and Tom Brady. So, great quarterbacks out of that place. But, man, did they put a throttling on Wisconsin. Let me tell you, it was fantastic. Wisconsin didn't have a shot from the get-go. Jonathan Taylor struggled, but even more so, their quarterback, Alex Hornibrook, woo, boy, he's got some questions to answer because at the start of the year, everybody was like, Alex Hornibrook, from the numbers he had with Danny Davis, him and Danny Davis had good hookup numbers last year, and then Jonathan Taylor last year, everybody thought, I know I did for sure, that Wisconsin was going to be the team to beat in the Big Ten. I thought they were right there ready to roll and hang out with Ohio State. Alex Hornibrook, not the quarterback I thought he was, because at the end of the year, he looked way better than he does right now. He threw for 100 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. His average per pass was 5. Huh? That's right, I said 5. As a quarterback, your passing average is 5. And you didn't have any run game really to do much with that either because Jonathan Taylor ran the ball 17 times for 100 yards. That's a good game for him, but you can't rely on 101 yards basically between your two star players to win a football game. That's why you got blowed out 38-13. I'm struggling with that, man. I'm struggling with that because they just weren't there. I mean, they had a fumble, but it was recovered by Hornibrook. I thought that was going to go to Michigan, but it did not. And it was very, very scary. Danny Davis had an okay receiving game. It wasn't fantastic. I mean, he had a big play for 12 yards coming out of the backfield. But I expected more out of him. I just don't know what to think of Wisconsin anymore after this loss. I think that loss eliminated all chances of them doing anything. Hornibrook just is not going to make it to the NFL level. But let me tell you about Michigan, because Michigan is awesome. Shea Patterson transferred from Ole Miss. Loved it. Thought it was a great decision. Went over to a place that has a quarterback who is a head coach and can develop you. He did it. Smart decision, because he had a game of his life, and it was fantastic. He went out there and put on an absolute show, because he threw the ball for 124 yards. Yeah, he was 14 for 21 with 124 yards. He ran for a career high 90 yards. 90 yards rushing for a quarterback on 9 carries. That's what I'm talking about right there. Michigan had it going on. Then they're like, you know what? We're going to put in younger brother to Christian McCaffrey, and he comes in for one play for Michigan. One play. Gets a direct snap, keeps it, takes off up the middle, takes it to the house. 44-yard touchdown. That gave him the lead 38-7 with 3 minutes and 16 seconds left. 5 minutes and 16 seconds in the game. It was over. They're the deal, folks. I'm telling you, Michigan is the deal. They're going to be the ones that have to watch out. The Ohio State does, because I'm telling you, they're coming. Michigan is coming. This was the first big win for Jim Harbaugh against one of those teams, against Ohio State, a ranked team like in the top 10. In the Big Ten, as in Ohio State, a Wisconsin, a Michigan State, somebody like that. So I'm pumped to see what he's got. He's got these boys on track. They're rolling. They're leading their division right now. They're tied for it with Ohio State at 4-0. So that's awesome. They're going to probably wind up playing a team that's going to be a shock to most. It could be Wisconsin again. But let me tell you, Northwestern has it going on in the Big Ten, folks. Nobody saw that one coming. I'll tell you right now, I didn't see it happening. They got it going on. So they're leading the conference right now. I know they're 3-3, but conference shows them at 3-1, so it don't matter. So that's who I see. But Wisconsin can still win that division and face either Michigan again, or Ohio State for that title. But let me tell you, Michigan had it going on when they were rolling. They were rolling, and it was on. Couple side notes I just want to throw out there to you guys just really, really fast are that they released a couple of the midseason All-American freshman teams. A couple of them, no surprise. The one I want to name to you real quick is Trevor Lawrence. He led that. Trevor Lawrence is at quarterback for, as everybody knows, the Clemson Tigers. And this is big news right here. This one is pretty rough. Wildcats quarterback Khalil Tate will not play. He will be out against UCLA with an ankle injury. They're going to start the old head coach's son, Rhett Rodriguez. He is the son of Rich Rodriguez, who was the head coach before they hired their new coach over at Arizona, being the coach who used to coach Texas A&M, and Kevin Sumlin. So Sumlin is the new head coach there. Then they got Rodriguez, who is Rhett Rodriguez, a sophomore. He will get the start, so he'll get the nod. Well, folks, that's all we have here after an exciting week of college football. Make sure you tune in again this week, because there's more great matchups coming up, like a couple to name. You got TCU, Oklahoma. You got Alabama and Tennessee. Tennessee coming in after a big win over Auburn last week. You got Michigan and Michigan State. You got Minnesota and Iowa. You got Oklahoma, TCU. You got great matchups coming up. So make sure you come back next week and hear some of these matchups that come out to be dynamic, and hear me break it down for you right here on the Red Line. We'll see you guys then.